Today I'm going to talk about a very cool subject. It's a very important one, and I don't know, I'm still in between on what to title my sermon, but I guess I'll go with Flirting with Sin or A Slow Fade, whichever one you guys like more. So, what I wanted to talk about is the process of falling away from God, or the process of what we call backsliding, right? Backsliding is when you fall away from God. That process is a slow process that you barely even notice, but it leads to devastating results. And I wanted just to touch base and show you that it is very true, it is very present, it is very real in how it works, and let's just dive straight into it. When I was in school, I had a friend, and he was, in a way, a lot like me. That's kind of how we make friends, right? Your friends are a lot like you. But my friend, although he went to church and although everything was just right, he would always be a little off. He would start off by listening to trash, music that's trash. And so he would constantly fill with his mind with trash. I do not support listening to music that isn't godly, that isn't edifying in any way, personally. I believe every person has their own choice, but that's usually where it starts, is you start polluting your mind. And so my friend would always pollute his mind. I'd always turn on his music that wasn't great music. And it would reflect later on his clothing, then on his friends. It would later reflect on the choices that he would make and the words that he would say, right? And so slowly, over time, grade by grade, year by year, you just notice that we started out here, but you look back 4 years and we're not where we were. And as we left high school, as we went our own ways, our lives became extremely different. My friend went really far, really deep, and I will not tell you their name, and I will not tell you anything else, but what I'm getting at is when you fall into sin, it's a very slow process. You don't just one day wake up and you are somebody else, right? A drunk was not born a drunk. Like the baby that's born, it's not just born a drunk. And a thief wasn't born a thief, right? They probably stole from their mama first, boosted a varenik out of a plate, and mom didn't see, and then boosted something out of dad's wallet, and on it goes, and then, boosted a neighbor's TV, and then robbed a bank, or I don't know. But the point is, everything in life starts out small. Everything in life is a choice, a small choice at first, but it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And even murder happens this way, right? It happens in the heart before it ever happens by the hand. Would you guys agree? And Jesus even said that if you hate your brother, you're a murderer for a reason. Where I'm going with all of this is that although things seem normal right now, although everything is great right now, you are fighting a war every single day of your life. And that war is called choice. 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 Praise God. Testimony. My friend came back to God. My friend changed completely his life around. He's doing great. And if I was to bring my friend here to testify, and maybe one day I will, but what he would say to you is that, yeah, I really did fall away very slowly. Because I did tell my friend, I'm like, why do you listen to that? Why do you dress like that? Why do you talk like that? Like, come on, buddy. And you know what? At some point, both of us almost went the same route. And I know most of you are also surrounded by friends, and some are good influence and some are bad. And so before you lays a choice. And that choice that lies before you is, which way do you go? Right? Because as people, we can't just stand still. We always go. And so where do you go? I want to read to you Luke chapter 16, verse 10 through 12. where Jesus talks about little things. Luke 16:10, and it says the following: "If you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with the greater responsibilities. If you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? If you are not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own?" Can you come back to verse 10? Pop it on the screen. If you're faithful in little things, and so we're back to little things. Little things. The way I see it is, when we're born, it's like we're halfway on the mountain. And you have a choice. A choice before you is to go on a hike and start climbing and sometimes scaling the mountain. It's a tough climb. It's steep. It's windy. It's not easy. It's exhausting. It's all of that. And the road to salvation might seem endless. And when you get to the top, though, you have a reward. How many of y'all been hiking? Come on, Pacific Northwest. Like all of you, right? I hope. If you haven't been hiking, wow, you live in the wrong region. At the end, there's a reward because you end up on top of a mountain and you get this awesome view. That's your reward, right? And at the end of our life, we also get a reward when we achieve a steep climb, this difficult path, this road that isn't easy, that's full of difficulty, where you're exhausted, where sometimes you just can't keep going, but you have to. There's a reward at the end. There's something beautiful at the end. And then, of course, falling away is always too easy. Who can agree? Falling away is always too easy. It's like going down the hill. You almost skip a step. You're going that fast. And it's not fast, first of all. Secondly, it's easy. There's no effort. Almost no effort. I want to compare this to like growing something in your yard. The good food, the stuff that you eat, the stuff that's good for you, it takes work to get it out of the dirt, right? Like you plant some potatoes and the bugs come. You're like, all right, well, I got to get rid of the bugs. And then the weeds start growing around there. You're like, oh, I got to get rid of the weeds. And then there's no rain. You're like, all right, I got to go water it. And so it takes intense labor to get something out of the dirt that is good for you. But when it comes to things that you don't need, let's say you didn't plant anything there. It just gets overgrown with weeds, right? And it's that easy to pollute your mind, to go onto a wrong road that leads downhill and not uphill. The road that leads you quickly into destruction. The road that takes no effort. And maybe you start out young and you're like, my whole life is ahead of me, and you already have this beautiful view that's partially obstructed. And you just take it down the hill from here. You're going to end up in a dark valley, alone and lost, without any reward, any view, anything, right? Because to see where you're going is to climb top. Little things that bring you further or closer to the top, which is God. And what are those little things? Little steps that you walk are the little choices. And that's the point of my sermon today, is I want to show you that little choices you make in your life, that the decisions you make, they either bring you higher, closer to God, or they bring you further away from God. They bring you lower. Question to you guys. Which path are you on? Are you on an uphill or a downhill path? Where are you going? What is the end result? Is it the darkness or is it the light? Where are you going? Right now, maybe it's you still see some light because you just began your life. Everything's new, everything's exciting, but a time will come, if you keep going down, that you will just not realize that you're lost and you don't see a way back. The path splits once, the path splits twice, and you just don't know where to turn anymore. You're lost in the dark. Little choices, little things. Jesus uses this parable A little different, but hammers the point home. Matthew chapter 7, verse 13. Matthew 7, 13 and 14. You can enter God's kingdom only through the narrow gate. The highway to hell is broad, and its gate is wide for the many who choose that way. Matthew 7, 13, brother. And now 14. But the gateway to life is very narrow, and the road is difficult, and only a few ever find it. This is basically what we were talking about just now, going up a mountain or down a mountain, going through a narrow gate or a wide gate. He calls it the highway to hell is broad. He calls it a highway. You know why it's a highway? Because a lot of people go there, right? What's a highway? A thing that many people use. And then a narrow road that very, very few find. So what he's saying here is that if you want to live, it's a difficult road. If you want to live, if you want to obtain life, if you want to win, it is a difficult road. But the easy road, the one that takes no effort, the one that doesn't take you trying, the one that is the cool way, the one that the path that many of my friends go, right? Your friends go. That one that takes no effort, that one's going to lead you into darkness. We're going to go into a Bible story. Before we go into a Bible story, another perspective on this example would be like a river current. Swimming against the current is always more difficult, but that's where God is. So swim against the current, little fishies. We're going into a story. There was a young man, and this is out of Judges 13, 14, 15, 16. This is the story of Samson. There was a young man named Samson. He was a buff guy. We all know, right? He was really strong. Probably a good-looking young man. He had 7 braids of hair. Was it 7? 7, right? 7 braids of hair. So stylish, good-looking, buff young guy. And, you know, when he was young, he had a lot going for him. He had a very great start. He started messing up in the middle, and then he had a very bad ending. And I want to take you guys through these steps and show you how very slowly over time you could degrade your life till you're in darkness. Judges chapter 13 verse 5. Judges 13:5. This is what the angel says to his mother. You will become pregnant and give birth to a son, and his hair must never be cut, for he will be dedicated to God as a Nazarene. Nazarite in this case. Nazarite from birth. He will begin to rescue Israel from the Philistines. And I want you to pay attention to the word begin. He will begin. It doesn't say he will rescue. He will begin. God knows the future. God knows the plan. God knows the purpose of every person. He will begin to do it. In other words, he will never finish it. So, moving on to the next chapter. Judges 14, verse 1 through 4. One day when Samson was in Timnah, one of the Philistine women caught his eye. When he returned home, he told his father and mother, "A young Philistine woman in Timnah caught my eye. I want to marry her. Get her for me." His father and mother objected. "Isn't there even one woman in our tribe or among all Israelites you could marry?" they asked. "Why must you go to the pagan Philistines to find a wife?" But Samson told his father, "Get her for me. She looks good to me." Verse 4, the important one. His father and mother didn't realize the Lord was at work in this, creating an opportunity to work against the Philistines who ruled over Israel at that time. So we see here that Samson started his ministry with a very good intention. He wanted to get into the Philistine nation somehow, and he was trying to marry a girl. He wanted to cause trouble to begin to set them free. He wanted to cause trouble to begin to stir something over there and get his people to shake off the yoke of the Philistines off of them. It says here that although he was pursuing a woman, which will be throughout his entire life, he'll be pursuing one woman or another, he was doing it for a good intention. I don't know where you're at in your life right now. Maybe you think you're even doing something for God, but you're doing it out of a selfish ambition or purpose. Rethink where you're going. Rethink it. look over your life and see where you're going, what you're doing, and do not do it out of a selfish ambition, but do it to serve God. Because, well, we all know his weakness is women, right? And here's his first, and he's doing it out of a good intentions. I think that's just the important thing to recognize in your own heart is, although you're doing the right thing, what are your intentions? So he begins to stir trouble. Judges 15, verse 3 through 5. Samson said, "This time I cannot be blamed for everything I am going to do to you Philistines." He is really upset because his wife got given away to his best man at his wedding. He's like, yep, you guys can't blame me now. He went out and caught 300 foxes. He tied their tails together in pairs. He fastened a torch to each pair of tails. Then he lit the torches and let the foxes run through the grain fields of the Philistines. He burned all their grain to the ground, including the sheaves and the uncut grain. He also destroyed their vineyards and olive groves. Tell you what, guys, modern day arsonists got nothing on Samson. This guy knew what he's doing. So he lit up the entire countryside, and he began to stir trouble for them. Obviously, the Philistines noticed. I mean, wouldn't you guys think they would notice? 300 foxes running with tails lit through the fields, burning everything in their path. They would notice. And so people asked, verse 6, "Who did this?" The Philistines demanded. "Samson," was the reply, "because his father-in-law from Timnah gives Samson's wife to be married to his best man." So the Philistines went and got the woman and her father and burned them to death. So, he is stirring trouble. As we read the story of Samson, what's interesting to note here, and I'm going to deviate a little bit from the point, is that the Spirit of the Lord is constantly coming upon Samson because this is indeed his ministry. This is indeed what he was called to do. And so at this point, at least twice, we see that the Spirit of God came upon Samson and he did something. He tore apart a lion, right? And then the Spirit of the Lord came upon him, and I think he attacked like 30 people for their clothes because he lost a bet or something. When you're filled with the Holy Spirit, the devil, especially if you're filled with the Holy Spirit and you start causing trouble for the devil, you start preaching, you start teaching, you start doing ministry, the devil will try to disrupt that. The devil will try to knock you out of the play. The devil will try to have you stop speaking, stop praying, stop preaching, stop doing whatever it is you're doing because you're on the right path. The devil is always dragging you down. The devil is the dead weight that wants to go down. But you need to keep going. And in Samson's case, I keep confusing the two. Samson's case, the enemy notice, and they come to him. Judges 15:11. So we just skipped to verse 11. So 3,000 men of Judah went down to get Samson out of the cave in the rock of Etham. They said to Samson, "Don't you realize the Philistines rule over us? Why are you doing this to us?" But Samson replied, "I only did to them what they did to me." But the men of Judah told him, "We have come to tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines." "All right," Samson said, "but promise that you won't kill me yourselves." "We will only tie you up and hand you over to the Philistines," they replied. "We won't kill you." So they tied him up with 2 new ropes and brought him up from the rock. As Samson arrived at Lehi, the Philistines came shouting in triumph, but the Spirit of the Lord came powerfully upon Samson. This is at least the 3rd time. And he snapped the ropes of his arms as if they were burnt strands of flax, and they fell from his wrists. Then he found the jawbone of a recently killed donkey. He picked it up and killed 1,000 Philistines with it. Then Samson said, "With the jawbone of a donkey I've piled them in heaps. With the jawbone of a donkey I've killed 1,000 men." When he finished his boasting, he threw away the jawbone, and the place was named Jawbone Hill. Samson was now very thirsty, and he cried out to the Lord, "You have accomplished this great victory by the strength of your servant. Must thou now die of thirst and fall into the hands of these pagans?" So God caused the water to gush out of a hollow in the ground at Lehi, and Samson was revived as he drank. When Then he named the place the spring of the one who cried out, and it is still in Lehi to this day. This is a very interesting story. It is quite a long one. First thing I wanted to point out is that when you are serving God, when you're doing your ministry, when you are trying to serve God with all that you are, and you're in the right place, God will use you and the enemy will try to disrupt you. And what's awesome is that God is a God who is a provider, is he not? Does God not provide for every one of your needs? Do you not have a job? Well, maybe some of you don't, but you have parents in that case, right? Do you not have a car to drive? Most of you do. God has given you everything. You have clothes to eat, clothes to wear, and wow, okay. Clothes to wear and food to eat. But he cried out to the Lord, and he said, "You have accomplished this great victory, but the strength of your servant must I now die of thirst and fall into the hands of these pagans." So God caused water to gush out of the hollow in the ground. What happened here is that God has provided for him. God has given him what he needed. God has given you everything that you ever need, and God has filled you with his Spirit today so that you may do his work. Happens. The enemy attacks you from the outside. The enemy attacks you through the external things. This is the first case in which enemy can attack you from the outside. It can attack you through social media, the culture, the music. The enemy tries to disrupt you from the outside. And that's what I will compare this army of 1,000 to, is the enemy attacks you from the outside. There comes a time when the enemy comes closer to home, when the enemy begins to attack you through your friends and maybe your family, and maybe people who are a lot closer to you, like your siblings or your mentors even, and people in your very close circle. And in Samson's story, that happened when they shut the gates of a city that he was in. Do you guys remember that story? And again, the Spirit of God comes upon him, and he overcomes this challenge. He takes the gates upon his back, the gates of a city. You guys must know that back in the day, the way they removed gates was with a battering ram, not by lifting them and carrying them away. They were extremely heavy. They might as well be a stone wall. But Samson picks them up and carries them away. Samson breaks through the second barrier. But what's interesting here is that we do see that he is already slipping from his ministry. You guys remember what his ministry is? Is to begin to destroy the Philistines. And when he had the first woman, he began with that very intention. But later now we see Judges 16, verse 1. One day Samson went to the Philistine town of Gaza and spent the night with a prostitute. Word soon spread that Samson was there, so the men of Gaza gathered together, waited all night at the town gates. They kept quiet during the night, saying to themselves, "When the light of morning comes, we will kill him." He stayed only till midnight, got up, took off the doors of the gate and everything. But verse 1, go back to verse 1. He was there with a prostitute. That is no longer a woman that he had some kind of a purpose with, right? Not any godly purpose, not any purpose that at all, really. So he is now not married, but is with a woman. And an enemy now has something against him. When an enemy cannot destroy you from without, what's by culture, by social media, by all those things, and an enemy cannot destroy you by people closer to your life. Maybe your close friends, maybe your relatives, maybe, I don't know, people all in your social circles. He goes for the inside. He goes for the very thing you care about. He goes for your weakness. And here we see his weakness has always been women. And so Samson meets Delilah. And the devil has finally caught him in this, in this case, the Philistines have finally caught them. But when all of these things fall through, there's still a way to catch you by your inner weakness. And he falls in love with Delilah. And Delilah is paid, what is she paid here? 1,100 pieces of silver to betray him, to find out what his secret is, and to basically make him weak. And that is what sin does to you. And it's fascinating, right? How many times did Delilah betray Samson and did exactly the thing he told her would make him weak? How many times? You guys remember? He's like, well, this will make me weak. And she does that very thing. And then she's like, well, this will make me weak. And she does that thing. And that's the thing about sin, is every time you do it, it makes you weaker, or it strives to destroy you, but you still stick around. You still want to do it, right? You still love it. God wants to get rid of sin in your life. God wants to set you free. And Samson is not seeing that he slowly went from God's purpose into his own self-interest and into his own doom. That is the way you fall. You fall by thinking, first of all, you're doing something for God, but with a selfish purpose. Then you're just doing something for you, and then you're just lost. And when this woman is obviously trying to destroy him, he doesn't see it. How can you tell me I love you when you don't share your secrets with me? You made fun of me 3 times now. You still haven't told me what makes you so strong. So 3 times, 3 different times. And he still kept going. Let's just stand to our feet. When we read the story of Samson, just a little overcap, when we read the story of Samson, from very beginning of his story to the very end, we see that he constantly defies the will of God. He constantly does the things that he's not allowed to do. And maybe he starts out right, but then he goes down and down and down and down, and every little choice he makes is a step downhill. You guys are all doing great. You're in a house of God. You guys are all doing great because most of you serve somewhere, somehow. But I just want to ask you this question. Are you going down, or are you on your way up? Are you getting to know God more, or are you just polluting your mind? Because it's easy to go down. It's easy to pollute. It's easy to destroy. I mean, how easy is it to destroy, but how difficult is it to put together? A storm comes through the town, right? Some kind of hurricane comes through the town. It lasted maybe an hour. How long does it take to rebuild that? How long did it take to build that? Much longer. If you allow sin into your life, and if you allow yourself to go down, to not work on yourself, if you allow yourself to get constantly destroyed, you will end up in a darkness. Where did Samson end up? His eyes got poked out, right? And he was just milling, walking in circles like a donkey, right? Milling grain, or grinding grain, whatever you call it. He was grinding, he was making flour. That's a donkey's job. They tie a donkey and make him go in circles. And they poked out his eyes. Samson ended up in true darkness. Samson ended up all alone because he loved sin and disobedience to God's voice. He loved going downhill a lot more than he loved getting closer to God. And God saw this end of his, and God knew what's going to happen, and he said he will begin to destroy the Philistines. But somebody else finished the job. The purpose that God has for you today is a great purpose. It's a lot better purpose than you can find in sin and in serving yourself and in living your own pleasured life and chasing after whether it is girls or fashion or cars or I don't know what you guys are up to. You know your life. But that will not bring you satisfaction. You know what will bring you satisfaction? His purpose. Getting closer to God, getting to know Him. Yes, the path might be more difficult. Matter of fact, it is almost guaranteed it will be more difficult, but it is also so much better. And if that's not great, there's a reward at the end. So you can go down and enjoy a temporary sin, or you can go towards eternity and enjoy forever with God. Which one do you choose? Where are you going? And that's the question I wanted to ask you today. Slow fade or flirting with sin? Are you flirting with sin today? Are you fading away, or are you getting closer to God? I can't answer that for you. Only you know. But if time only makes you worse, then maybe you should rethink something. If time doesn't make you better, then maybe you're not going the right way.